My question is, in terms of it being applied, and you said it's being applied to services and service users and co-producers, is where, and it was about power, I think you said, where then is that moving from the consumer to having responsibility for the service user? Where does that fit with accountability?
It's about who's involved, and so in some ways we've been working very closely with commissioners in Lambeth, bringing also elected officials into a process of rethinking what services are, what's needed, how they're designed, how they're commissioned, trying to involve young people and commissioners and elected officials working together to begin to recognise that there's part of this is about elected democracy, representative democracy, and part of this is about a more participatory democracy, a sense of accountability and voice through action. And in some cases, those rub up against one another sometimes. So I wouldn't want this to be presented as a kind of community is a great, comfortable, perfect place. Some of this is about deliberation and dialogue. I think doing some of this in a co-productive way enables more opportunity for that deliberation and that transparency. It creates a space for people to understand what the various challenges are, what some of the decision-making needs to be between various different elements. I don't know if you're as far developed here as we are in England, but increasingly local authorities are becoming purchasers and much less providers of services. And I think as we move into that space, we need to think more and more about how the authority role shifts into one of maintaining accountability about equality of access, what additional support is needed to ensure that this is something that everyone can be part of, rather than just those who are closest and most able to engage from the beginning. So it's an ongoing conversation. As a practical example, with some of the work with young people, the commissioner there has worked with young people to develop and design a service which has now been commissioned, unfortunately competitively commissioned, which did then undermine some of the collaboration that had taken place. But they're working with those young people to then become youth auditors, so that they play an ongoing practical role in looking at the quality of co-production in those services and reporting back to commissioners. And the commissioner is having to work then within her local authority to ensure that the information that those young people provide her with is just as important as the other types of metrics that she's also being asked to consider. So it's not nice extra stuff, but it has an equal weighting. But it's a good question. It's continually evolving, and it's important to be looking at that, particularly through a lens of equality and equality of access.
There is a difficulty in having users measuring their own outcomes in terms of trust and nothing.
Yeah, about trying to find the right blend. I think there's definitely a challenge when we're talking about outcomes, as opposed to measuring the busyness of services. If we're actually about the change that service is supporting, partly that is about people's lived experience and their sense of the difference that's taking place, but it's also then about triangulating that with some of the common forms of data. But I think, measurement and proof is an ongoing conversation with all of this.
I wonder to what extent as well it's involved with the debate about how you shift commissioning towards measuring social value.
Yeah.
I think that if we can do that, then that will be it's at the end of the race, if you like.
Yeah, and I think, I showed this up within the commissioning work we've been doing with NEF's interest in a triple bottom line. Whilst co-production has been a strong focus, we've been talking about the method of service being around co-production. We've also been then looking at outcomes that can be attributed to social, economic and environmental. And the question is then also what are the trade-offs? And how can we have a grown-up debate about how we achieve the best result for the pound that's invested within a particular community setting? I think we're seeing an increasing interest in devolving commissioning into a more local setting where people may be able to play a more active role in that debate because it's about stuff close to home. But then again, this question of how do you ensure equality of access, that all voices are heard, is challenging. And the constant kind of throwback, how can authorities tolerate services looking different in different parts of a borough, in different parts of a county? But if we're genuinely about working with the resources and the assets in different places, it's probably part of this challenge. can we hold on to some common outcomes and say we're all heading towards the same positive end point, but perhaps some of us have different routes to get there.
Because one of the difficulties that I feel we encounter is being a town on the border of two district councils, which is now going to be in the border of, again, another border once the RPA comes in next May. We have consulted.
Where do you work?
Asylum Newton Stewart. Yeah. It's just the sense that everything is done too, and that we're a long way from the notion of reciprocity, of actually really being taken seriously and having accountability, being responsible as a citizen. So I don't quite know how we can create forms to do that, but I'm encouraged by what is taking place in other parts of the UK, because I think we can work towards that. But it's baby steps at the moment. Certainly in a rural community.
Do you get any sense that the shadow council or the current council want to work with you or put in place mechanisms to involve you in the community planning process?
I'm not sure that we've actually engaged with the shadow council to put that question to them, but it's certainly something I'm going to go home with and start investigating.
I think in terms of working with the Shadow Council, and I won't say which area I'm from or which CEO, the new council I was speaking about, because we met with him yesterday, but what he was saying was, and I asked him about community planning, and what he was saying is there's just so much challenges, just, getting the new councils working together, but probably for the first year or so it'll be the status quo operating, and then really it'll be, a year after that before there's any really creative new thinking done.
But I think it is. I don't think it. As most of you will be aware, most of the urban regeneration functions from the department I'm part of are going to transfer to the councils, and obviously there's a risk of discontinuity. And I really do think it's both. They say both a threat and an opportunity, but the sector really does need to engage very strongly at this stage.
Absolutely, but I think what this CEO was saying was, in order to protect the continuity, they almost have to maintain the status quo for a while until there's opportunity to become creative, to think about how to become creative. So I don't see things changing overnight. It'll be a slow process.
It's kind of interesting in Wales, you will know better than me. I know the Williams Commission just recently was reporting in a similar way. They're looking at the future of public services in Wales, and one of the threads was redrawing boundaries, which administratively everyone is focusing their time and effort on. But another thread within that was very much about, I think they've even named co-production, but very much the sense of how we work differently with the public and with communities. And what seems to be happening in Wales is, whilst the bureaucrats are bothered with the bureaucracy, those activists and those civil servants who recognise the opportunity in co-production are beavering away right now, kind of writing the policy in order that when the heads come out of the bureaucratic stuff, there's an answer to some of these terms and some of the phrases that have already been kind of put out there that people haven't yet had the time to think about in terms of practical implementation. So if they can get that to work, I think they're really, onto a fine trick there, because they're going to be able to offer solutions when people are kind of finally ready to turn around and recognise they need some.
What volunteering would take place, what active citizenship would take place, and the difference that makes. And I don't know, while things are tricky strategically, if that kind of work could take place, because it's a great thing to celebrate. And it's on the basis of that really positive knowledge that so much creative stuff can be developed.